I I cannot for the life of me tell whether Chloe from The Circle slash Too Hot to Handle is real or fake, but one of my prevailing theories is that there is one moment in season 2 of The Circle where a little bit of her comes out, and it's the most devastating scene in the entire season. Hi, we are live here to chat about objectively terrible TV on my end and really good TV on Kate's end. Um, we were discussing whether the shock in the thumbnail is real or fake. I think the shock might be somewhat real because I think that the person featured in the thumbnail, Miss Chloe, is a very like genuinely excitable person. But there was a little bit of her where some fakeness came out, and it was like well meaning, and she was being fake to be nice, and it just like crushed my soul. Okay, so we have a full agenda for today. I'm going to be super briefly, definitely not for half the time, talking about 2 seasons of The Circle, wherein I will pick Kate's brain on strategy. And then she's going to talk to me about a show she's been watching that I did already watch the pilot of and loved, and that is Jupiter's Legacy. And we'll check in on the mostly hot mess that is DC TV this week, except for Superman and Lois is good. Spoilers. Um, we'll get into what I am so salty about. It topped my hate for Kevin Pearson this week, despite the fact that he was objectively worse than he's ever been. And then what else we watched this week at the end in the time that we won't have left over. So, Kate, before we get into all that, do we have any news for this week that comes to mind?
We do. So a couple of weeks ago, you mentioned Dev Patel being something, and it's actually The Green Knight is coming out. I forgot to write down a date, but it is based on a classic story from the King Arthur period. There is a classic play or poem written about it. I can't remember, but I am excited to see that. I like that story. Catherine Hahn is going to be in the new Knives Out movie, so as she should.
I'm so excited
Um,
about that movie. The
Elizabeth
words
Olsen,
cannot describe the
yeah,
level of happiness I felt watching the first movie. And every casting announcement adds like 10 years to my life. To all the people who
exactly.
don't want me to live forever, you must stop this franchise or else you will never be rid of me. That's all I have to say.
Elizabeth Olsen won Best Performance in a TV Show. Elizabeth Hahn won Best Villain. They together won the Best Fight, and the show itself won Best Show at the MTV Awards. I felt like I just needed to say that because the whole time we were watching that show, we're like, if they don't win an award, we're gonna set fire to something, which I felt was justified. The new Alona Holmes movie is now in development, so they're going to be making a new one. Yes, thank goodness. And Stars, I think, yeah, Stars it was, has announced a new movie, our new TV show based on Death and the Nightingales.
Based on what now?
The book Death and Nightingales.
I've never heard of that.
It's relatively an older book, but it's not like Regency era. Um, but it's basically from what I remember, it's about this girl who her father is kind of abusive and controlling, and she and this man that she falls in love with make some really shady decisions to escape that.
Hmm. Okay, I'm intrigued. I'm there. I'm
And
really, really, really
that's
excited for the next Enola Holmes. The first one, I think I
mhm,
remember giving it like best original of the year or something like that when I first watched it. And I
Mhm.
do not take that back at all. Carrie in the chat says he's going to cover his ears when we start talking about Soups and Low because he hasn't watched it yet. No worries. Kate hasn't watched it yet either, so I won't get into any spoilers. And Stormy says, hi. Hello, Stormy. Thank you for putting up with all of my Kevin Pearson hate on Twitter. So let's get right into it because I don't want to talk too long about The Circle. But here's what we are going to do. For you, Kate, and for those watching along, I'm going to give myself like 3 minutes to very briefly describe the premise of this reality show. And then I'm going to pose a question to you, and I want everybody's answers. Particularly, I want your answers if you have not watched The Circle. Okay? So here's the premise of this show. Everybody is essentially in an apartment complex. They're filming on location together, but they're all in separate rooms. They can't see each other. They can't hear each other at any point during this competition. And they're only interacting via like a digital messaging interface. It's supposed to kind of look like social media, but it's not social media. Okay. They're able to group message and privately DM each other. And as they're doing that, there might be certain events where they all have to hop into a group message together and do like a trivia game or a themed game or something. There's certain moments where the private messages are open, they can private message each other. They can put up a picture of themselves. They can kind of set up a profile where they have like a picture or a couple pictures of themselves. Sometimes they're allowed to put up like a really short video of themselves, almost like a boomerang or something. And sometimes they can put up pictures of what they've done. Like there might be like a challenge where they had to like bake a cake or like do some little craft. They could put up a picture of what they've done, but they can't actually like FaceTime each other or see each other face to face. So prime setup for catfishing. You can be yourself or you can be an entire catfish. Okay. Anyways, at the end of each, it's basically at the end of each day, at the end of each like cycle of, games and whatever, people get voted off. Like you all rank each other and you're essentially voted off. Basically, the top two get the power to eliminate somebody. They don't have to eliminate the bottom person, they can eliminate anybody else. But it's essentially kind of like a popularity contest of like who you trust, right? And then at the end, when it gets down to the final six have their last voting, and that's the ranking that decides the winning. So it does not get down to final two or final three or anything like that. When you're doing the final voting, it's still generally a group. It's just not the largest group. And then the final six, all after locking in their ratings, get to meet each other and see who is real and who is catfish. So you have some people like the girl in the thumbnail who are, I'm going to loosely say, celebrities going on this. She's been on a Netflix reality show before and got quite popular from it. And then you have some people who might be catfishing as celebrities. So somebody was kind of catfishing as a member of NSYNC, which was like a believable catfish, like somebody from a band that doesn't do anything anymore might go on a Netflix reality show, but it wasn't them. Okay. So my question for you, and I think I met my 3-minute minimum, is if you were to go on a show where it's a reality show and you could be anybody you want because you are just having to kind of like message as them, would you be yourself or would you be somebody else? And if it was somebody else, who would it be? The most popular catfishes, or like not most popular as in like they win, but like most common catfishes are not actually celebrities. Somebody might go on as a person that they just think would be more likable. An old person goes on as a younger person because he thinks the younger people might leave him in the game longer. A guy might go on as a hot girl. A girl might go on as a single guy. Just like any kind of strategy of who you think might be able to be popular and stay in long enough to scam a bunch of Netflix reality people and win $100,000. So, Carrie, Stormy, Kate, etc., anybody watching, who would you go on as?
My answer is immediate. I knew it from like 5 seconds in. I would catfish, but it would be a person of my own imagining. This person would be an author that of a novel that they are writing, and that this is clearly a way for them to do marketing.
That is smart. You know why that's
Because
smart?
anytime they have questions, like I can bring up the book, I can have things to talk about without actually having to talk about myself as much. And so it's almost like I'd have multiple characters that I could be talking about, and then just have to remember that I'm supposed to be this author.
That's ingenious, and I'm going to tell you why, even though obviously you already know because you picked it. If you're going on as like an author, it's basically the same as like going on and being a producer or a casting agent or anything like that. Everybody going on this show, a lot of them are like Instagram models or trying to plug their fitness thing or whatever. They're all pretty attention seeking to an extent. And therefore, they would love interacting with somebody who's sort of like giving them attention and wanting them to be the star. They would love interacting with this idea of like, oh, this person's not necessarily just here for the money. They're here to do research. They're interested in me. I can be the star of their book. I can be their main character. You know what I mean? Like it just appeals to that base sense. Brilliant. Carrie in the chat says, I'd be myself. Catfishing someone takes too much work. If you're catfishing, it does take work because you have to do this over the course of like 2 weeks. You have to consistently do it in multiple situations. And for example, a guy was catfishing as a hot girl and he was doing a really good job of it and was flirting with one of the most popular guys in the circle very successfully. And it was keeping him in and keeping him ranked high. And then they had a makeup challenge and he sucked and everybody figured out that he was catfishing. And just because people figure out you're catfishing doesn't mean you be eliminated. Somebody could figure out you're catfishing, but you're still popular for, you know, what it is. But everyone was just pissed at him and eliminated him. Stormy says, I would be a hot girl. Stormy, you are a hot girl. But yes, there's a lot of people who go on this. It's like, I am a Playboy model. Like, okay. Very cool, Kenzie. It works though. It works. It consistently works. At least for the first few weeks
Yeah.
or first few episodes or whatever. Anyways, on this show, I will try to describe what I interpret to be one of the most, I want to say like rawest moments in the season, in a season that is it, like the show is, it's intentionally cheesy. It has like a really funny narrator. It's not like a reality show that gets serious. Okay, there's no like fake bachelor-esque tears. Like these are people playing a social deception game to try to win $100,000, and this is a reality show that's very low on the tears. But early, very early in the season, season 2, which is the latest season that Chloe, thumbnail girl, was on, there was a girl named Teralicia. I want to say her name is. Yes, Teralicia. Teralicia, I think she was pretty young. Chloe was young. Everybody going on this show is pretty young, but Teralicia was maybe on the younger spectrum, and she was really trying to play like this kind of like cutthroat badass game, but you could really easily tell that she was just like taking this way too seriously, way too personally. Most people going on this had some motive other than just the $100,000. You have somebody going on who's trying to get some more Instagram followers on their model account. You have somebody just trying to, you know, like they're trying to get hyper attention and they're not going to be crushed if somebody doesn't like them. Some people go on intentionally trying to be the villain just for like clicks and likes and stuff. So Teralicia, she just took this way too seriously, way too personally. She was very much seemed to be getting in her feelings over if somebody didn't like her. And she started out strong where she was one of the top 2. So I think that gave her like a bar to reach. And then after that, as she got rated lower and lower, and people started playing the game, and as part of the game, you know, like people make jabs at each other, question other people's characters, you know, just to try to bump them down the ratings. She just did not take it well. Okay. And she wasn't not taking it well and like, oh, I'm so sad kind of. She tried so hard to come across as like a tough girl, and she was mad about it, and she was going to be, like just trying to act like she was a bitch about it, act like she wasn't in her feelings, but she was in her feelings. So it's like already kind of sad. Like she's not playing the game well. She's not really very likable because she's not nice, but you feel bad for her because you can tell she's actually upset. Okay. But trying so hard to act like she's like head bitch in charge. Okay. So when they exit, and she was voted out, of course, because everybody could kind of see through her little, front of being the badass or whatever. When they exit, they have the chance, after it's too late for them to spoil it with anybody else, they have the chance to meet just one person. And she chose to meet Chloe. And she walked in, and you could tell she was trying to like walk in with like, a little bit of like alpha energy, and she was going to be in charge, and she was kind of mad because Chloe was one of the ones who got her out. And when she realized that Chloe wasn't a catfish, it caught her so off guard. She seemed unpleasantly starstruck. Like she was a little bit starstruck because she knew who this, you know, beautiful, popular, celebrity ish, lower level celebrity was. And it completely threw her off her game. She was obviously upset about being starstruck. Chloe, she kind of she tried to she kept up her whole facade of being like this kind of like, she does this whole like bubbly airhead thing of like, I don't know who's going on, I just love everybody, who could be a cat, like that. She kept it up, but you could kind of see the celebrity come out. It's like very tangible. You can see like the people control coming out, and she was like, oh honey, like you're fine, blah blah blah. And it was just very much a like celebrity interacting with a non-celebrity dynamic, and it was just so soul crushing to watch. Like it was the saddest scene in the entire thing. There was like obviously this like power dynamic going on. You're not rooting for Tara Alicia at all because she's obviously bad at it, but she's still kind of like crushed by this person who's like trying to like comfort her and be nice to her. Anyways, weirdest scene I've watched in the entire show, but the whole show's good. And you should watch it, even though you might not enjoy it at all.
It's a wonderful pitch.
Yes, thank you so much. I told Kate on Twitter, I was like, hey, I marathoned 2 whole seasons of the show over the weekend. I don't think you would like it. I will pitch it to you.
Yeah, I was like, I'm so proud of you. I probably won't like it.
Yeah, you won't. But you know what you would like is a show you marathoned this week. So I am now passing the pitch baton to you. I think I'm mixing metaphors there. Talk to me about Jupiter's Legacy. I've only watched the pilot.
So I'll be perfectly honest. I went into this show thinking it was going to be like a parody of superhero shows, and not to be mean or harsh on the costume department, but it's 90% based on their superhero costumes. They were good, but there was something about how like the type of show that it was in that it very much clashed, and it felt very out of place. But everything else about this show was great. The first episode had some weird costumes and weird sci-fi, weird visual effects, but everything afterwards was awesome. So essentially, it's telling the story of this kind of League of Justice heroes, basically. These heroes that you have to, and it kind of goes through 2 different timelines. So one timeline, you're starting in the 1929, right as the stock market crashes. And you follow this one guy and his brother and a friend and a couple friends. And then you're also in the modern timeline where you were back with the same guy, and he is dealing with his own, like his teenage children and their issues, and how his old code that they've always operated on is now being called into question by the public, and people kind of not agreeing with what he's doing anymore. And two, you kind of are never really sure who's the good guy fully. Nobody's full on hero like or villains like the superheroes in the boys are or anything like that. But it definitely from the get go shows all of these heroes as like very morally gray heroes that have their own demons that kind of haunt them and cloud their judgment a lot of the time. And so like with the main character, I guess you would call him the main character, he has kind of this inability to see anything except in black and white. And he, because of this, very early on in serving as a superhero, decides that he's not going to kill ever. Not even not even as like last resort, just never kill. And
Hmm.
because of this, he actually it's revealed that he's lost people because of this decision. It's probably clouded his judgment on sometimes some events of betrayal that have happened in the team, stuff like that. But it's a really great analysis of like the character behind that kind of person, like what can actually happen. This person that should be so morally upright, and what happens when they try to stick to that so hard that it kind of goes south. Um, it also it's just a really it has so much development for all these characters, even though it's only 8 episodes, which is great. I also really enjoy that it kind of addresses the question of like these superheroes are pseudo immortal, basically. They can be killed, but they're all 100 something years old. Um, and one of them asked the question of like why didn't they step in wars? So in superheroes uh, stories where these superheroes have been alive throughout major wars and stuff like that, there's always the valid question of like, why didn't they step in? And that's addressed, which was really fun to me. I thought that was really interesting. Um, but it definitely played a different type of story than most superhero shows do. There's only really like in the main storyline one event, and
Mm.
you're just following the fallout of that one interaction, and it makes the final twist really interesting. The 1920s storyline, I wasn't expecting to love it as much because I thought it was going to be cheesy in a superhero show, but it was probably my favorite part of the whole thing was
Mm.
figuring out the interesting puzzle of how they got the powers because it's a very there's some amount of it there's like a little bit of a plot hole like okay but why, but it is so much more interesting and it's almost like a mummy type adventure
Yeah.
um, when they go to get their powers, which is it's a fun twist, like a new dynamic to a superhero show that's not really ever there.
I kind of got the feeling watching the first episode that they were spending a lot of time trying to introduce a lot of characters and make sure we knew who everybody was and how they relate to each other. And it took the whole episode to do that. And I have to presume that that's because for a superhero show, this is very character driven, but not plot driven as much. Was that your take on it?
Yeah.
Isn't it? Okay.
Like I said, like the main in the current storyline, there's a couple different story parts. Like there's a part that follows these get you kind of bring those outlaws, and then the moral dilemma following the main character's son, and then you kind of are getting snippets of history between the main heroes, like what happened to one of their friends, like they're not talking to anymore, and you are kind of introduced initially to so many different characters, but it's because they're trying to develop this really intricate like web of betrayal and like how they got here. It's much less focused on the events, like the action or anything. It's a very low action superhero show for it to be a superhero
I
show.
love
I
that.
mean,
The action
there
scenes are
is
when I
action,
half tune out most of the time.
yeah. Well, and there is action, but it's very much more like you get the character driven stuff in the action, which is the kind of action I prefer.
Hmm.
And honestly, there is a lot of talking for a superhero show.
When I watched the first episode, it was whatever day it was I told you I would watch it, which was whatever day you told me you'd marathon the entire thing, which seemed like a good sign. And
Mhm.
I watched it with Peter, and I liked it, but he loved it, which is one of the reasons it's taken me a while to watch it because, like, I have plenty of time to marathon it, but getting the Venn diagram of our time to watch thing to overlap, it's usually just a couple hours a week.
Mhm.
So I will slowly watch it over the next couple weeks, most likely, and I'll keep you updated on my thoughts. But I'm very excited, and it kind of reminds me of like it's this is weird, but the premise of it and the vibe I got from the first episode is like the vibe I get after a show has been on for like many seasons, like 8, 9, 10, whatever, and you have like you've developed this like younger crew and older crew where introduced new characters and they're trying to transition to the younger crew. Good examples of this that I've seen. 24 did that, trying to introduce like younger versions of Jack Bauer, however you feel about that franchise. I get it, but like they they kind of did that or tried to do that multiple times. Um Obviously Arrow tried to do that. I would say that's an example of it being unsuccessful, but it's usually something you get when a show's been on for like a decade or something. So it was interesting to get that vibe first episode of season 1.
Yeah, well, and that's a big part of the story that goes on in the modern storyline. Because you're mainly, I was actually surprised we didn't get more focus on Brandon. So that's the main character's son. I cannot remember half of the names. I normally do, I just can't. I watched it in a day. Um, but Brandon was one I wanted to see a lot more of because he had a lot more potential for the very classic, like, kill and not to kill superhero thing, but with the added, like, layer of daddy issues because, we
Right.
have to be original here.
Right. Throw
Um,
in a little
but they
spice.
did, well, spice, something we haven't seen before.
Right.
Um, but there was like as like classic of a setup as that is, it was something that there was a little bit of uniqueness in the fact that his dad was still the main superhero and he's like the sidekick basically. That kind of added to that dynamic a little bit. So I was surprised they didn't go that way, but then also you look at the cast that they have in this show, and I'm like, okay, I understand why you didn't give 90% of the screen time to the kid and you gave it all to Josh now.
I think if the show is character driven, I presume chemistry will make or break it. I'm curious to see how that goes. Okay, in the chat, Stormy says, I know Flash probably won't get talked about. Can I say how bad that show sounds? End it next season. Fingers crossed. Barry dies. Oliver didn't get to raise his kids or be with his wife. Well, here's the thing, Stormy. I will talk about the Flash. I will keep it brief because shocker, it wasn't great. But the reason why I want to talk about the Flash is because I found something new to complain about this week. Now, there's always the things we know and love, and I'm going to highlight two of them that were just extremely hyper present this week. Sometimes when I watch something that I'm sort of like not hate watching, obviously, because there are multiple characters that I do actually enjoy on the show, and I just kind of like to complain about Barry and the ridiculousness of it. But if anybody enjoys it, I'm happy for them. Um, but sometimes when I watch shows and there's like an annoying thing, I can sort of get in my head and be like, am I just being like hyper picky or like overhyping my dislike of this thing? And this week, two things were so prominent on The Flash. I really was like, okay, I'm not crazy. These two things are annoying. So, number one, um, the ethics, I harp on the fact that Barry's a villain. I stand by that. I've said it on here, I've said it on stage. I pretty sure I said it on CW Fan Talk, and I'll say it again. Like, I stand behind it. Barry's a villain. But there are times where he does like good things or heroic things from time to time, but holistically he's a villain. This week there was a scene that really, it was like a minor scene. It shouldn't have been like a big thing, but it really just, I had to stand back and be like, this is really uncomfortable and unpleasant if we're supposed to see it as a good thing. If you were trying to sell me this as like HBO level like corruption amongst main characters, I'd be down. But for this, it felt unpleasant and kind of untimely. And here's the situation. A series of murders had happened, as are wont to happen on a show like this. And Barry is there at the scene of the crime to investigate. Papa West is there as well, to investigate, and is also kind of investigating another cop. And then Iris shows up to report on the crime. And you can visibly see like some of Barry's colleagues and like other cops and detectives there. Um, but Barry starts talking to Detective West about certain case details that it's kind of left unsaid that he's keeping off the record because he wants to investigate it as Flash instead. And he's disclosing this to the cops before his detective team, before he puts it in an official report. Okay, so already some ethical complications, but this we can kind of suspend disbelief within a superhero show and say, okay, you're disclosing it to somebody who's not in your division, you're keeping details from the rest of the team, but hiding information from the rest of the cops is not something that really bothers me necessarily in a show like this, because sometimes we're supposed to see it sort of like the superheroes are like rogues and they're not like playing by the book like cops. Like, okay, a lot to unpack there, very untimely, but not the worst ethics. The fact that he starts to disclose case details and who the next murder target will be to the media, to Iris, so the three of them are all disclosing things to each other, or Barry is disclosing Casey. I'm not going to throw Iris or Papa West under the bus on this, actually. They didn't do anything wrong. Barry is disclosing case details and who has died and who's going to die to a reporter and a cop in something that he's not keeping the official report. Something about it was just so overtly ethically wrong. It was like uncomfortable to watch the scene. The other piece that really bothered me, didn't really bother me, it was almost like ridiculous, was just like how far they're taking this like mismatched family thing. The person who was his mother, who's now the Speed Force, is now his daughter. So his mother is now his daughter. And just based on the fact that he married his sister, like, I just need them to stop giving him female relatives at this point. Like, it's just a bit much. He also now has a daughter who's just like another attractive woman near his age, and it's just like, it's just weird. It's just weird. We don't see him as a paternal figure, and that's kind of the crux of it. So those are my two consistent gripes that are not new gripes that were just heightened this week. Stormy in the chat says, sorry if this is a dumb question. Why the hell are West Allen acting like these forces are their kids? Isn't one of them using the looks of his dead mother? Do they need more incest adjacent stuff? That's what I'm saying. Like, because you already have like incesty vibes to the show, you need to like not mess with the concept of like one family member being another family member, or you thought it was his mother, now it's his daughter. It's just like, ooh, calm down on that. Like, you haven't bought yourself the space to play with those concepts. It just kind of gets like squicky, because like it can be like kind of teehee fake squicky when it's like it's him and his stepsister basically, because it's like, okay, it's kind of weird. It's not like in a cute way, but whatever. It's not like wrong. But when it's like characters that have previously played his like actual family members are now like have a different relationship to his family. I'm just like, I don't know about all that, man. Like, this is CW, this isn't HBO. I don't know what you're trying to do. It's a little weird. They don't have that kind of chemistry. You're like flying around carrying these family members around town, and it's like, y'all are CW age and CW attractiveness, and I don't buy any of this. It's weird. It's weird. I don't like it. And I don't like that they haven't let okay, again, not rooting for him and Iris at all. I don't think they have chemistry and I don't think they like each other. But it's also kind of draining to see them be like so unhappy. Like him and Iris have been habitually like unhappy. Like you never see them smile in each other's presence for like weeks now. Like he and she are always like upset when they're around each other. And as somebody who doesn't like them but does like romance, like fix it. Do better. Like I'm not going to find them cute, but at least make some effort to try to get me to find them cute, you know? Anyways, the new thing that I found annoying this week is that people are not matching each other's energy when it comes to scenes. And this is where I'll transition to talk about Superman and Lois. Because Superman and Lois is where I'm seeing people very much do a good job at like matching energy when they are scene partners. When you have like a strong actor in Superman and Lois, and they're with somebody that is admittedly maybe like newer, younger, whatever, they thrive off each other, and really the scene is elevated such that it can be like a cheesy Superman show, whatever, but it's still really fun to watch. Everybody's doing a good job, and like I believe that these people are like doing good work together. On the Flash, it's kind of weird. It's like, and I don't think they're doing this as like a COVID precaution or anything, but a lot of scenes really read as if like they filmed one person one day, another person the other day, and then edit it to make it seem like they're in the same room. Like somebody will be like over delivering, over emphasizing, and then somebody else is like giving me nothing. It was very weird. I have one exception to that. I know I'm obviously biased because I'm such a Caitlin Snow fan. I would say Danielle Panabaker does a really good job of that. She's also probably the most experienced actor on the show, so that's probably why. But she does a really good job of matching energy. You see her kind of be like a lot when somebody's like playing a lot. It's why she and Cisco play off each other really well, because Cisco plays like a lot, big facial expressions, big motions, and she'll play it down and more subtle when she's with Barry. So it makes it seem like he's understated on purpose. And that's one of the reasons why they come across as like adults together. But everybody else on the show is just like not playing well together. It's like watching a group project where nobody likes each other, which may genuinely be the case here. Stormy asks, has the chemistry improved with Superman and Lois? Yes, I think it has. I'm not shipping Superman and Lois. I'm going to be honest. It's not like that kind of chemistry is improved, but I believe them to be like a married couple in a married relationship that we can root for. I really liked this week's episode of Superman and Lois. I actually Martin was saying today, Martin the Flash from Arrow Squad that I used to do, that he has been watching Superman and Lois. He's been talking about it sometimes on his Legends of Tomorrow podcast, which is still going, Tomorrow's Legends, if anybody's watching Legends and wants a Legends podcast. And he is just like fanboy, you know, heaven when it comes to Superman and Lois. And for once, I cannot disagree. I want to be curmudgeonly, but that show's great. Excellent. Okay. We have now arrived at what else we watched this week and Salty Cammie Corner. And I just talked a lot about DCCW. So, Kate, tell me something you watched this week. Tell me what else you watched this week. Everything else you watched this week that was not DCCW.
I watched a lot of Taskmaster. That's about all I watched other than Legacy. I am about to start a show called The Irregulars, which sounds kind of like it looks kind of like almost the Six of Crows characters from Shadow and Bone meets Sherlock Holmes.
Okay. That sounds really interesting.
That's the impression I'm getting. So that's the next show to watch, I think.
Is it new?
It's been on Netflix for about a month, but
Okay.
both that show and Legacy, I never saw anything outside of Netflix about it.
Yeah, same. I feel like Jupiter's Legacy, when you mentioned it, like I had maybe heard the title at one point before, possibly saw one tiny ad, but other than that, had not really seen any like Netflix promo or anything for it. The Irregulars sounds familiar, but I could just as easily be getting that mixed up with any other show's title that sounds similar to that. I'm
Yeah, that's
curious how those go. Okay. I watched a show you might like, which is Selena Plus Chef, which is Selena Gomez getting trained on cooking stuff by gourmet chefs, and thoroughly enjoyed that. That's excellent. I'm almost done with season one. I watched the spring finale of Good Girls, which is one of the best shows on TV right now, if anyone was curious, and that will resume in summer. Can't believe we have to wait until then. And I watched the finale decision day of Married at First Sight, in which the couple where the guy gaslit her, verbally abused her, and had a whole other pregnant woman on the side that he wasn't telling her about. That couple chose to not divorce. And I watched This Is Us, wherein Kevin basically dabbled in emotionally cheating on his fiance that he was about to marry, is about to marry, who just spurred his two twins. And despite all of the things that I just listed, all of the candidates that I just listed for salty moments of the week, I have one that's worse. I have one that tops all of that. I have one that's worse than Kevin Pearson at his worst. Okay. Please note that this is not me having quote unquote shipper goggles on. I actually have no stake in this race. On Zoe's Extraordinary Playlist, there is a love triangle. This love triangle, I have said on multiple occasions, just does not interest me. I'm not mad at it. They can continue it, but neither one of the two guys was it working for me. You had two guys that were, I would say, similar levels of attractive, similar levels of like baggage and issues that are downsides, similar levels of positives that were good sides. To me, there was no clear winner. To me, she didn't have remarkable chemistry with either one. I liked the musical of it all. I liked the way they were dealing with like the intersection of comedy and grief on the show. I liked the side characters, but for once, I was not there for the romance. In this show, she has powers where she can basically, it's basically the musical version of she can read people's minds. So I'll just leave it at that. Basically, she has the ability to read people's minds with some limitations. She can read feelings. Okay. And she reads them in the version of like hearing music inside their head. And we are now on season, I think it's like 4 or something like that, where she has had these powers and they've consistently done what they need to do to keep her powers like fresh and interesting. And in the finale, she finally confesses her feelings to one member of the love triangle. It's a very like classic moment where she starts the finale episode and she's still dating one leg of the triangle. They break up. She goes to the airport as the other half of the triangle is about to leave to move across the country. It's like extremely like rom-com classic trope. You would think I would love a good trope like that, and I was so ready to love this trope. They finally meet next to the San Francisco bridge, after like being ships passing in the night the entire episode. there's about to be this cute, like sunset and moment and whatever. And I'm like, okay, pull me in. Like, I want a good romantic moment, even if this isn't my ship. Like, give me something. And it seems like they're going to. And then she confesses feelings to him and instantly loses her powers. No, worse. She confesses feelings to him, and her powers appear to transfer to him. He can hear her thoughts, and she is unaware of, like, essentially he's hearing her thoughts in the way that her telekinesis always works, which is he can see her like singing the way she can always see other people singing. And they previously established in this show, because she had like previously lost her powers for like one episode where basically everybody else can hear her singing, but she can't hear everybody else singing. So like they've established that she can lose her powers by them transferring to others before. We knew that, but it was like a temporary glitch before. And she does not like it. It was not good for her. She was not like, that was not a pleasant episode for her. So for that to happen, she has now lost her powers in the season finale, ostensibly setting up for a season next season wherein he has her powers instead of her having her powers, if they even get another season, which they're not necessarily renewed yet. The fact that she lost her powers the second she confessed her love to him made me want to flip a table, particularly in the context of Shadow and Bone, which, like, yes, I've not read book 3, but also I am not blind and illiterate and have read spoilers. And I know that Alina loses her powers in the end and lives happily ever after with a small boy in a meadow, whatever. I'm so tired of women losing their powers over love. Can we not? Are we not tired of this? It is 2021. I'm more tired of this than I'm tired of Kevin Pearson.
Okay. Because I read the third book in that context while reading it, I enjoyed why she had to give up her power. But I would be on the side that normally I would be very hesitant to be on board with it.
Okay.
And since I have watched a good portion of Zoe's Extraordinary Playlist and know what power signifies in that show versus what it means in Shadow and Bone, I'm going to go ahead and say that I probably would not like it there.
Thank you for taking my side in this grand debate between me and myself. Stormy
My
says, I'll
pleasure.
take a second to be salty. I truly can't stand Kevin on This Is Us. He's so selfish and the way he's behaving is trash. Also, I don't like where Zoe and Max are going on Zoe's Extraordinary Playlist. Thank you. I needed that validation as well. Everything I had to say about Kevin, I said last week, so I won't reiterate it. Just know he's trash and he's not cheating with one woman, he's cheating with two. And they even went so far as to show his fiance coming into contact with an ex this episode, and she paid him no interest and like didn't even so much as really speak to her ex. So it really shows like the contrast between that and him being like, I remember my high school girlfriend. God, shut up. No one cares. I can't stand Kevin. He's so selfish. He's like an energy vampire. Stormy says, fingers crossed for a Good Girls pickup. I would love for Good Girls to be picked up, but I will also say, like, don't get me wrong, NBC, pick up Good Girls before literally any other show. It has been so strong and so well written that even if the final episodes, which are airing this summer, if that's the ending, like, I'm just really pleased with how much good content it has given us, especially like at a time where I feel like there was a little bit, for me at least, there was a bit of a lull in like good television where it was like Good Girls I really liked, a couple things I really liked, and then there were some things where it was just like, I'm just kind of here for the entertainment. With a glass of wine, it's okay, but like it's not really anything to write home about. Good Girls really filled a niche with a really good, strong cast, and I can see all of them. Like obviously, Christina Hendricks, like her acting career does not end here, shockingly. So they're all going to go on and do great things. But for sure, I will take as much more content as they want to give me. I am at this point not even a little bit worried about them ruining the story as I usually get at this point. I just don't see how they could. They've just been so consistently strong that really sounded like a challenge for them to ruin my current favorite show. But I really just don't think they will. I think it is strong. And even if they have the ship nearly killing each other as they are every week, like, okay, you can nearly kill each other. I'm about to read to the end of Shadow and Bone, where the ship that I definitely don't ship at all, one half will kill the other. So, like, it's fine. What's the worst that can happen?
You say that, and I was confused about what ship you meant.
I ship Alina and Mal, the good children that want to do
That's
good,
not the part that confused me.
the good heroic kids who
The
definitely
thing,
have great
you're
chemistry
just you're,
and
you're just saying that. It's just poking a hole into me now knowing the one part of the last book that you don't know.
does Mal die? Say yes. Here's my
Kinda.
problem. I've been reading book two intermittently. I'm about halfway through book two at this point. So I've read a good few chapters of book two this past week. And book Mal is just awful. The show Mal is good. He just gets way too much screen time. But book Mal, like every page I read of him just infuriates me. And it's been at this point in the book, it's been quite a stretch since we've interacted with the Darkling that like the Darkling's not even in my thoughts at this point in time. Like whatever. I'm sure he'll come back and be like smoldering and evil and whatever. Like, okay. But book Mal, who like refused to be her like initially was throwing a fit about being her like captain of whatever her protection, like you don't want to be protection for your wife, like it's a job that you'll get paid for. Aren't you supposed to like, aren't people supposed to protect their partners for free? Like I don't know. I'm
Is
like
there
not pitching my anger very well, but just know I have very logical and self-righteous anger in my head.
to be perfectly honest, the second book was my least favorite.
Okay.
And the end of the second book and the beginning of the third book blend together in my brain. There's no separation. I have no idea where it stops goes. But it also is very telling about the quality of the previous adult fiction novel that I read before this. That
Uh-huh.
when I was in the middle of book two, I was actually having thoughts of, I'm really proud of Lee Bardugo because she could have made him so much worse. Like, he's only mildly irritating, and there is some level of this that I understand his perspective on. And that's the thoughts I was having in my head. So, and I can't fix that. I can't go back and not have those thoughts. So anytime I hear somebody complain about Mal, I'm just like, I mean, he was not perfect, but he was much better than he could have been. Which is really telling about the genre in particular. But
I mean, on the one hand, that's kind of a healthy mindset, but on the other hand, like, okay, in real life, like, yes, we need to understand that the people we're interacting with are human and our partners are going to be human. We can set astronomically high standards and refuse to date everybody who doesn't meet our standards, and that's perfectly fine. You're perfectly justified in that. But most likely in a relationship, you're going to have to like be okay with like little flaws and annoyances. I get it. But in fiction, we don't have to drop our standards. Like in fiction, you can write people that are exceeding your standards. And I don't mean in a manic pixie dream girl sense. I don't mean in a flat Disney prince sense. I mean just in the sense that like you can add complexity to an annoyance. You can add meaning to a way they behave. You can still have them do things that are frustrating, but have it be a little bit more meaningful than just like flat pettiness. Or if it is flat pettiness, have that be like an interesting and funny part of their personality. A just straight up petty character might be uncomplex enough to be just like a side character, but still can be interesting. I don't know. That's what I struggled with. But that's, I don't know. That's me speaking before
Yeah.
I finish the series.
I mean, that's fair. Definitely the argument of like, we don't have to lower our standards for fictional characters. But on the other hand, I find 90% of fictional and real people insufferable. And I just have to like, to not go into a blind rage 99% of the time. I have to kind of go through these, like, he could be worse.
That was such a female Mr. Darcy thing of you to say.
Thank you.
You're so welcome. Well, with that, I bid you farewell for now till next week. Actually, next week is the Wednesday right before Memorial Day. Are you going to be around? Should we do like a Memorial Day break for next week?
That's up to you.
Okay, we'll think about that. We'll think about that. If we don't do one next week, we'll make up for it with even more rage and shows to pitch the following week. Rage coming from me, as always. All right. I will then talk to you soon. Bye.